Gas fitter exam cram session, video 18. Okay, the New York City Fuel Gas Code has undergone one revision since its 2008 version. The edition currently in use is the 2014. I went over briefly, how the new code is supposed to work. We get a new code. It's supposed to be revised every 3 years. By the time that process is done, we get a new code every 6 years. Should have had a new code in 2020. That one would have taken effect midnight of December 31st. We don't have that. A lot of things, obviously, a lot of stuff is not happening. But I think the most important takeaway for this is, when I can, when possible, not only am I trying to prepare you for this exam, but also the future afterwards. You pass this exam, you get your gas card. You may be working for the city. You may eventually get a job in the city. That means, as with any job, you got to go to a job interview. Now, I always feel if you took a civil service examination to be on a list that the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, let's say you can consider it the Personnel Department of the City of New York, has made a certified list to say that you definitely fulfilled all the qualifications. You are a qualified applicant for the city. When you go to a job interview, you shouldn't have to answer any questions. You've already been certified. You don't need to take another test. Now, you could bring that up. I think it's a viable point. At the same time, it's a job interview. It's like you're going for a job, We never really want to make waves at the interview. We want to seem the most pleasant, most wonderful person that, hire us. You'll be so happy you did. So, yeah, you're probably not going to harp on that point. That's not really the time and the place to bring up that point. So, what's the alternative? Be able to answer all their questions. So, what's one strategy? What kind of questions do they ask? That would be good. Well, one of the questions they always ask you at these interviews is, well, what's the code we're working with? What's the current code? And your answer is going to be 2014. So this particular question answers two questions. One, you would find on the gas test. Two, one you might actually get asked at interviews for a city job. So you're set in that respect. Okay, question 38. Prior to the 2008 New York City Fuel Gas Code, and the 2008 was the first of the new codes. I'm going to refer to them as the Bloomberg codes because that was that's his legacy. That and frickin' City Bike. Because we didn't have enough parking spaces as it was, but sure, let's put the damn fucking bikes, because you know what? I'm sure, they see just as much use in the winter and during snowstorms. Yeah, City Bike. I like the Bloomberg code. That was good. City Bike, not so good, I think. Prior to the 2008 New York City Fuel Gas Code, the Fuel Gas Code in use was part of the 1968 New York City Building Code. Okay, we had one large building code, and all the codes were in it. Okay, the 1968 Building Code. One of these videos, I am going to bring out the actual Department of Buildings publication, and I'll show you the 2 volumes of the 68 Building Code right next to the volume of just the Building Code. Forget about mechanical, fuel, electrical, general administrative, energy conservation code. Those are separate volumes. Okay, the structure and organization of codes also changed. It used to just be the building code, and our plumbing code was a chapter in the building code. The Bloomberg codes, all the codes now are their own separate books, and they are volumes in the set called the construction codes. So Before the 2008 New York City Fuel Gas Code, we would be using the 1968 code. We would be using the chapter on natural gas installations, which was a chapter along with plumbing, electrical, masonry, wood, whatever. All those chapters, part of the building code. Okay, so the code got much, much bigger with the Bloomberg revision of it. So, just for this question, prior to 2008, we were using the 1968 New York City Building Code, of which gas was merely a chapter. I think it came right after the plumbing chapter, which was merely a chapter, not an entire standalone code itself, like it is today. 39. This is important because this question here is the basis for a few questions which I don't believe should be in the exam, but they are. We'll harp on that at the very end. Okay, it starts getting involved. It starts going to places in the code that I don't see why we need to go to. You know, we're not master plumbers. We don't own the business. We're not the permit holder. But once again, you know, playing as much as you want, it's still going to show up on the exam. So, we'll start with this one. Question 39. A permit shall not be required for minor alterations and ordinary repairs. What are minor alterations and ordinary repairs? There's several criteria for them. Definitely the monetary amount involved. You know, there is a certain monetary amount. We will cover that. That has actually been a question. For the scope of work, minor alterations or ordinary repairs, for example, let's say anything from the stop valve on the outside of the wall to the trap on the outside of the wall is a minor alteration or ordinary repair. You don't have to take a permit out for that. Let's say you're changing the toilet. You're just changing it. You're not adding a new toilet. You're just changing the one that's there. Minor alteration, ordinary repair. Let's say let's say you're relocating the toilet, but you're relocating it in the same bathroom. You're just moving it around a bit. You may be changing the piping a little bit, but it's not like you're adding an extra fixture. It's not like you're taking the toilet out of the room and putting it in a different room. You start doing stuff like that. You start changing the piping, changing the amount of fixtures within a room. You start changing the fixture unit load to the piping. That requires a permit. Okay? That does not fall under minor alterations or ordinary repairs. Minor alterations and ordinary repairs, you're changing stuff. It's in the general course of maintenance or just having a house, a building. You know, you're putting a new bowl in. You know, you're replacing a section, just a section. There is a linear footage limit. We'll get into that, but just a section because there's a leak in it. But you don't need a permit because you're not changing the piping itself. You're not changing the sizing. You know. Let's see. For gas, and this is how weird it gets. The flexible connector for a stove. This is one of the contradictions of the code because the fuel gas code says that its boundary is at the outlet of the most remote shutoff valve. So let's say we're going to talk about the shutoff valve to a stove. The flexi shouldn't be any of its business. We should be able to turn the valve off, disconnect the flexi, put a new flexi in, possibly more likely because we're putting a new stove in. New stove, new flexi. But no. If that flexi is longer than 4 feet, weird number, but if that flexi is longer than 4 feet, you need a permit. So, let's say you had a stove and you bought a new one and you want to take it out and that stove has a 3-foot flexi, and the new stove, it would be really nice to use the 6-foot because it makes it a lot easier to make the connection and then push the stove in. But you can't use the 6 foot because you need to take out a permit for the 6 foot flexi. So what flexi are you going to use? You're probably going to go with the 3 foot. Do they make a 4 foot flexi? Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Good question. Going to look into it. But I can tell you right now, if you don't want to go and take out a permit for just connecting your new stove, don't use anything longer than 4 feet. Really weird. Okay? But that's the way it is. And that also answers another question, because that will be another question. In addition to what's the longest flexi? 6 feet. What's the longest flexi you can use without needing a permit? 4 feet, believe it or not. Okay. 40. Ordinary plumbing work may be performed without a permit in an R2 occupancy. That's R is for residential. So R2, there's R1, R2, R3. R2, apartment buildings. Apartment buildings are R2. If fewer than 6 families reside, fewer than 6. And once again, the wording, fewer than 6. So if 6 families reside in that apartment building, and we'll say each unit is a family. That's pretty much how they go by. 6 units, you need a permit. 5 units, don't need a permit. So we would hope that, 2 floors, 2 units of floor, 4 families, and then we decide to have a penthouse. That's 5 units, you don't need a permit. 3 floors, 2 units each, 6 families, need a permit. That's all that's saying. Yes, this can be a question. So, question 41. A fuel gas fired water heater boiler may be replaced without a permit in an R3 occupancy. R3 occupancy is 1-2 family. So, domestic boilers. So we're talking small boilers. If 350,000 BTUs or less in capacity. Okay, so you have a 1 or 2 family house. That's not a huge boiler. That's a small boiler. That boiler is, you could put that in the back of your Ford 350, your F-Line 350, whatever it is. You can actually fit that in the back. So what's a small boiler? Well, now you know. Small boiler is 350,000 BTUs or less. And this one here, 350 is the number, and then anything less is included in that. So 350,000 BTUs or less. Remember, 350,000. That's a good number, because as involved as this gets, and this seems to be, it's starting to shy away from being just the guy who shows up, is told what to do, and then installs it in a professional manner. Now it seems like I'm concerning myself with stuff that starts falling to the boss, the guy who owns the shop, the master plumber, the supervisor. I mean, that's kind of, the GC, if you want, or the permit holder. I mean, I'm not going to go pick out the boiler. The boiler's going to be there, and the boss is going to tell me that's got to be in by the end of the day. That's it. But it's in the code. Anything's fair game. 350,000. Remember the number. It'll pop up again. It's a good popular number, because now we see it seems to be the boundary, the definition of what a small domestic boiler would be. R3 occupancy, 1-2 family, 350,000. Question 42. Oh, see, we actually touched upon this. Replacement of flexible gas tubing does not require permit if no greater than 4 feet located downstream of the appliance's existing gas cock and not penetrating a wall. Well, we knew that when we established that what was the maximum distance for the shutoff valve to an appliance and the union that comes downstream from that shutoff valve to the appliance. We established that the maximum was 6 feet, and we established that 6 feet is measured along center line of the piping, and it's all got to be in the same room. It can't go out the wall to somewhere else, or out the wall and back in the same room. So this makes sense. Okay, the flexi, yes, if no longer than 4 feet, and of course it's going to be located downstream of the appliance's existing gas cock. And of course it's not going to go through a wall, because anything downstream of the shutoff valve is within 6 feet and in the same room. So, 4 feet. And you know what? That's seeing these stipulations. Let's go back to 41. 350,000 BTUs or less in capacity, and just so we've been exposed to this, the appliance gas cock has not been moved, okay? And the plumber has found the chimney in good operational condition. All right. Remember, this is what we need a permit for. If you're just replacing stuff, okay, you know, ordinary, minor alterations, ordinary repair, changing the boiler can be a minor alteration, ordinary repair if 350 BTUs or less, 350,000 BTUs or less, if the appliance gas cock has not been moved. Now, that sounds like a small thing. It's not. What that is, it is a telling clue, because if the appliance gas cock has been moved, then somehow, some way, you had to deal with the gas pressure on the upstream side of that valve. How did you deal with it? Well, I hope you didn't do it on the fly, because that's a huge no-no. So did you shut off the gas at the next place you could shut it off, which probably is going to be the meter? Well, once you shut it off, you can't just turn it back on. Think about it for a moment. You shut off the gas at the meter so that you can move that shutoff valve to the boiler a little bit this way, a little bit that way, right? You do that. I'm sure you did a great job. I know that's not going to leak, but you're going to turn the meter back on. How do you know that during the time the gas was off, nothing else changed in that system? How do you know? How can you be absolutely certain? Do you have X-ray vision to see the piping, the concealed piping in the walls? No. You know, I mean, how do you know? So all of a sudden, this requires some way of verifying that the piping is still good after you shut off. And well, you know, they're not going to just say, oh, well, we're going to take your word for it. See, now you're inviting issues. Okay, now you're creating situations you can't be 100% certain of. You don't have a 100% complete control. So, if you're going to start doing that, they want you to take out a permit, because once there's a permit, there's something that's open. And they look at it and they see this is open. Why isn't it closed? Eventually, because it's waiting on a test, certification, inspection, you know, a certificate to say go ahead, occupancy, or turn the gas back on. A permit lets them know something's going on, and it binds you to it in that you need to, you know, they're going to watch you. You do something that you're not supposed to do, or you didn't do something you were supposed to do, they're going to know. Okay, so if you leave the shutoff valve right where it is, that means you never touched it. You never moved it around. All you did was shut it, do your work downstream of the valve, finished your work, turn the valve back on, sprayed it down, checked for leaks, good enough. Okay? So the gas cock cannot be moved. You move the gas cock, that's a huge red flag. Okay, how'd you do it? Now we got to get involved. So you need a permit. And the plumber has found the chimney in good operational condition. The chimney is your duct work. You know, you got your flue piping coming off the appliance, your duct work going up through the masonry chimney, because byproducts of combustion. One of them, carbon monoxide. You know, you don't grill indoors because there's no place for the smoke to go. There's no place for the carbon monoxide to go. You know, you could kill yourself. Same thing. The water heater, the boiler, they depend on combustion. They're going to need the flue is going to need to go into the chimney. The chimney is going to need to go up. There's going to need to be clear. You're going to the plumber is going to ascertain that. If it's working, if you got a draft, you're going to determine there's a good draft, good. No problem. Don't need a permit. If something's wrong with the chimney, it's got to be fixed. If it's got to be fixed, it's got to be certified that it's been fixed. You cannot leave, if something's wrong, you can't leave it that way. That's how people die. You need a permit, because a permit now tells them something was wrong, it's going to be fixed. Now they can make sure it was fixed. It lets them know what's going on, and now it binds you to it. It makes you liable. You got to answer to that. Okay? It's a lot of explanation, but the main thing is 350,000 BTUs. Okay. Let's see. Question 43. Question 43 is part of a family of questions that deal with appliances installed on a sloped roof, and you will get asked these questions. Okay? When an appliance is installed on a sloped roof with an edge of more than 30 inches above grade, a level platform shall be provided for servicing at each side requiring access. So you got a rooftop unit, whatever it is. The roof is sloped, it's not flat, okay? And the unit itself, the edge of the roof itself is more than 30 inches above grade. That's a little too high for comfort. They want, at the unit itself, some kind of level platform that you're not trying to be a monkey. You're not trying to worry about keeping your balance, not letting tools slide off the roof and fall down and hit someone in the head. They're trying to say that, you know what, that situation requires a nice level working surface for everyone's safety and benefit. So, if the edge of the sloped roof is more than 30 inches above grade, you're going to have a level platform. Do you have to have it all around the unit? No. You just need it at the sections of the unit where you're actually going to be working at. The access panels, that's where you're going to be working at. That's where you want that platform. Okay? Keep in mind the number 30, that will come up a lot. Okay? 30 is a number that repeats itself when we're dealing with this family of questions. A unit on a sloped surface. Question 44. Appliances installed at grade level. So the floor, right? We could, let's say a parking garage or, just the floor. Shall be supported at least 3 inches above the floor. So if the supports are going to be drilled into the floor and that's what the unit is going to be supported on, it's supported on these supports. These supports are affixed to the floor. They're 3 inches. Let's say you want to go the opposite direction. We're not going to put supports on the floor. We're going to put supports in the ceiling or some cross member or whatever. And then we're going to support the unit from the ceiling, from the cross members. Then the unit has to be 6 inches above the floor. Okay? If you're using the floor, the supports bring it 3 inches above the floor. If you're using the ceiling or cross members, if you're hanging, the unit, the bottom has to be 6 inches above the floor. 3 and 6. Okay? 3 and 6. 45. Used gas fittings. Used anything. Trick question. Don't even think about it. Used gas fittings. Used gas pipe. Used this. Used that. No used. No damaged. No repaired. No refurbished. Shall not be reused. Used fittings shall not be reused. Everything's got to be new. If it can't be new, you can't use it. So, it's a trick question. Shall not be reused. Period. Question 46. This is a question to reinforce what you can or cannot use in a gas system because you can slip up, you can forget. Let's keep reinforcing that. The one fitting that cannot be used in gas piping is A. Let's go through them one at a time. a street elbow. I told you, you can use it. The controversy comes from, there was a time you couldn't. But you can now. You can use a street elbow. You can use a street fitting. A union. Of course you can use a union. We've been talking about unions. They gotta be within 6 feet of the appliance. They gotta be downstream of the shutoff valve. A cast iron flange. Yes, we can. Remember, we went through a whole thing about a cast iron flange, that if we're going to use cast iron flanges, got to use a full face gasket. If we're going to use a cast iron flange and a steel flange, the steel flange got to grind the raised face off to make it smooth before we can join them, and we still got to use that full face gasket, okay, for a cast iron flange. So yes, we can use a cast iron flange. So even without looking at D, we know D's got to be the answer to this question, but let's look at D. D says a steel bushing. And I put steel bushing down to try and trick you in a way because, well, you know, we're only going to use steel piping, right, for gas piping. We're only allowed steel, no plastic, no copper, only steel. So steel bushing at first sounds, well, we're allowed to use steel. Yeah, but we're not allowed to use a bushing, so I don't care if the bushing is steel. It's the bushing part. You're not allowed a bushing, okay? No bushing. No tubing, no bushing. Let's see, no flare joints, not allowed those. No lamp wick, not allowed those, okay? No bushing, not allowed that. We're not allowed to use aluminum. We're not allowed to use copper, only steel. And of course, stainless steel is steel, so stainless steel falls into steel. We're allowed to use stainless steel. Okay, question 47. In a gas distribution system with an operating pressure over half a psi to 5 psi, so 5 psi, thinking already 5 psi, starting at what size must everything be welded? Well, we said the blanket system, the blanket stipulation was that in a gas system, the largest, and I should write this down, we wrote it down before, but for this thing, repetition is very important. It is difficult to get, it takes a while, and it can be difficult, confusing, sometimes frustrating to get this to where it's just instinctive, because it's a little weird. A lot of guys, this is where, like, you know, it's like, it never feels right until finally it does feel right. And it's only going to feel right if you keep doing it and doing it. So, we're allowed threaded piping. We're allowed welded piping. And where we use threaded and where we use welded depends on what limits we hit. And these limits depend on the max pressure of the system, the size of piping we're using. But a blanket statement, a very good, solid question, okay, to start us off is, what is the largest size threaded fitting we could ever use in a gas system? Notice I didn't say anything about pressure. So we can assume that, you know, the largest fitting, period. Okay? Well, a half PSI system, the smallest pressure we're dealing with is going to allow us to use the largest threaded fitting we possibly can use, and that would be 4 inches. Okay? The largest threaded fitting we can use in a gas system, that's all I'm saying, gas system, is a 4-inch threaded fitting, which, if you must know, is going to be in a half PSI system. But that's not what the question is asking. And we know that this is the limit, and after half a PSI, what did we say the next number was going to be? It was going to be 5. Okay? And we know, of course, it's going to be greater than half. And we know 5 is where it ends. You know, and then what was after 5? The next limit was 15. Good enough so far. Let's see what the question is asking of us.